Chapter 1. Prelude Beneath the Shadows. The year was 2278, and humanity stood on the brink of something extraordinary. Orbiting Mars, a jagged ring of obsidian metal gleamed faintly against the red planet's dust-choked horizon. The Relic Gate, as they called it, was older than any known civilization, an artifact unearthed from the void. Its purpose lost to time. Scientists had spent decades probing its mysteries. But it wasn't until a stray energy pulse from a solar flare struck its core that the gate roared to life. A ripple of blue light tore through space. And for a fleeting moment, the stars beyond seemed to shift. Captain Kalia Serys watched it happen from the bridge of the Dawnseeker. Her hands steady on the helm despite the tremor in her chest. At 32, she was no stranger to the unknown. Her dark hair was cropped short, practical for the zero-gravity life she'd chosen, and her hazel eyes carried a sharpness honed by years of command. She'd lost her parents at 12, vaporized in a mining ship explosion near Titan, and that pain had forged her into someone who never flinched. Never faltered, until now. Signals stabilizing. Her first officer, Lieutenant Merrick, called from the sensor station. His voice was tight, barely masking excitement. "It's broadcasting something. Coordinates. Maybe? Patch it through," Kalia ordered. Her tone clipped. The crew of 200 moved with practiced efficiency, their faith in her unshakable. She'd led them through asteroid storms and pirate ambushes. This was just another frontier. Or so she told herself. The viewscreen flickered, displaying a star map no human had ever charted. A single point pulsed red, far beyond the heliosphere, in a region spacefaring nations had only dreamed of reaching. Kalia's breath caught. The Relic Gate wasn't just a relic, it was a door. "Set course," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her. "We're going through." The Dawnseeker hummed as its engines flared. A sleek vessel of humanity's ambition cutting through the void. The gate loomed larger, its edges crackling with energy. As they crossed the threshold, the universe twisted. Stars stretched into streaks of light, then snapped back into focus. On the other side, a nebula glowed violet and gold, its tendrils curling around a system of unfamiliar planets. "Systems green," Merrick reported, though his brow furrowed. "Captain, I'm picking up something, multiple signatures. Closing fast." Before Kalia could respond, the comms erupted with static. Then a voice, cold, mechanical, and utterly alien. "Intruders detected. You have breached the forbidden zone. Surrender or be neutralized." Kalia's instincts kicked in, shields up, evasive maneuvers. But even as the crew scrambled, the first salvo hit. The Dawnseeker shuddered, its hull groaning under the impact of energy beams that sliced through space with surgical precision. The viewscreen flared white as a second ship appeared, massive, angular, its hull a dull silver that swallowed light. Nexus, she'd later learn they were called. The enforcers of a galactic empire humanity had never known existed. "Return fire," Kalia shouted, gripping the helm as the ship lurched. The Dawnseeker's cannons spat plasma, but the enemy vessel shrugged off the hits like rain on steel. Another beam struck, and the bridge exploded in chaos. Sparks flew, consoles shattered, and Merrick's scream cut off as a bulkhead collapsed. Kalia's world narrowed to the controls. She banked hard, dodging a third volley, but the Nexus ship adjusted effortlessly, its weapons locking on. "All hands, abandon ship," she yelled into the comms, her voice breaking for the first time in years. She punched the override, launching escape pods as the Dawnseeker began to fracture. She made it to her own pod just as the final blow landed. Through the tiny viewport, she saw her ship, her home, erupt in a silent fireball. 200 lives snuffed out in an instant. The Nexus vessel didn't pursue the pods, it simply turned and vanished into the nebula, leaving nothing but wreckage and silence. Kalia floated in the dark, her pod drifting back through the gate on autopilot. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from rage. She'd failed them, her crew, her family, all over again. The faces of her parents flashed before her, overlapping with Merrick's. With the engineers she'd laughed with over rations the night before. She slammed her fist against the POD's wall, the dull thud echoing in the confined space. Hours later, a salvage team from Mars retrieved her. She stumbled out of the pod, her uniform torn, her face streaked with soot and tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. The Earth Council convened an emergency session within days. Their pristine chamber on Luna a stark contrast to the blood and ash still clinging to Kalia's mind. The signal from the gate must have alerted them, she told the counselors, her voice raw. They called it the Forbidden Zone. They didn't negotiate, didn't warn us, just attacked. Counselor Vren, a wiry man with a politician's smile, leaned forward. Captain Serys, you took an unauthorized risk. We can't afford a war with an unknown power. The gate is off limits until we understand what we're dealing with. Understand? Kalia's laugh was bitter. They killed 200 people in minutes. They won't wait for us to understand. They'll come through that gate next. The council has spoken, Vren said, his tone final. Stand down, Captain. That's an order. She left the chamber without another word, her boots echoing on the polished floor. Outside, she stared at Earth through the station's viewport. A blue jewel hanging in the void. The council thought they could hide. That diplomacy would shield them from what she'd seen. They were wrong. Back in her quarters, Kalia pulled a battered hollow disk from her locker, a gift from her father. Showing her as a child laughing on his shoulders. She traced the image with a trembling finger. Then snapped the disk shut. No more running, no more waiting. She opened a secure channel on her comms, reaching out to contacts she'd made over years of freelancing, pilots, engineers, survivors like her. This is Kalia Serys, she said, her voice steady now, a blade forged in fire. The council won't fight for us. But I will. If you've lost someone, if you're tired of being afraid, meet me at Outpost 17 in 3 days. We're taking the fight to them. The transmission cut off, and Kalia leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The Nexus thought they'd crushed humanity's first step into their domain. They'd miscalculated. She'd make them pay, not just for her crew, but for every soul they'd dared to erase. And she'd do it her way, with a fleet born from the ashes of their arrogance. In the silence, a spark ignited. The war for the stars had begun. Chapter 2. The Survivors. Outpost 17 hung on the edge of the asteroid belt. A ramshackle station cobbled together from salvaged hulls and forgotten dreams. Its corridors buzzed with the hum of failing generators and the chatter of those who'd slipped through society's cracks, smugglers, deserters, and pilots too stubborn to quit. Kalia Serys stepped off her shuttle into the chaos, her boots clanging against the rusted deck. 3 days had passed since her broadcast, and the response had been a flood. Dozens of ships, patched and battered, now orbited the outpost like moths drawn to a dying flame. She'd called them the Ash Fleet, not out of pride, but necessity. They were the remnants, the ones left behind when the Earth Council chose cowardice over courage. Kalia moved through the crowd, her navy jacket torn at the sleeve where the Dawn Seeker's insignia once sat. Eyes followed her, some wary, some desperate, all hungry for something to believe in. You really think we can fight them? A gruff voice cut through the noise. A burly man with a scarred face stepped forward, his flight suit patched with mismatched fabric. Heard what happened to your ship? 200 gone. Just like that. Kalia met his gaze, unflinching. I don't think we can fight them. I know we will. They hit us because they think we're weak. We prove them wrong. He grunted, unconvinced, but didn't walk away. Others nodded. Pilots who'd lost crews to pirates. Engineers who'd seen colonies abandoned by Earth's bureaucracy. They weren't soldiers, not yet, but they were survivors. That was enough for now. The real breakthrough came in a dimly lit bay where a lone figure hunched over a workbench. Surrounded by Nexus wreckage Kalia had salvaged from the Dawnseeker's ruin. Torin Vex was younger than she'd expected, 28. Maybe, with a mop of dark hair streaked with grease and a left arm that glinted metallic in the flickering light. He was a hybrid, half man, half machine, his body a testament to survival in a galaxy that didn't care. You're the one from the transmission, he said without looking up, his voice rough but steady, a tool word in his human hand, prying open a blackened shard of Nexus tech. Thought you'd be taller. Kalia smirked despite herself. Thought you'd be less of a smartass. What's your story? Torin paused, his cybernetic fingers flexing as if testing their own reality. Nexus caught me 3 years back. Running supplies near Pluto. Experimented on me. Wanted to see how human flesh holds up to their toys. This, he tapped his arm. A dull clang echoing, is what they left me with. Escaped when their ship hit an ion storm. Her smirk faded, and now? Now I want them to bleed. He finally met her eyes. His gaze burning with something darker than anger, purpose. You've got their tech. I can crack it. Kalia slid a datapad across the bench, displaying scans of the wreckage. Show me. Torin plugged his arm into the pad. A faint hum filling the air as his neural link synced. Lines of code scrolled across his vision, reflected in his irises like a ghost. Their AI's rigid, he muttered, half to himself. Predictable, built on linear logic, inputs, outputs, no deviation. Humans don't think like that. We're messy, chaotic. That's our edge. Edge enough to fight back? Kalia pressed. He yanked a crystalline core from the shard. Holding it up, this controls their targeting systems. I can turn it against them, make their ships see ghosts. Fire on nothing, maybe even each other. Kalia leaned closer, the weight of his words sinking in. How long? Give me a week, and better scraps than this. He gestured to the pile. You're building a fleet, right? I'll need a ship to test it on. Done, she said, extending a hand. He shook it, flesh meeting metal, and for the first time since the Dawnseeker burned, she felt a flicker of hope. The next days blurred into a frenzy. Kalia rallied her ragtag recruits, assigning crews to ships that barely held together. The Ash fleet grew, 20 vessels, then 30, a patchwork armada of freighters, mining rigs, and a few stolen fighters. Torin worked non-stop, his bay a storm of sparks and muttered curses. Kalia checked on him daily, watching as he pieced together something new from the Nexus's arrogance. She found him on the 5th night, slumped against a console, his human hand clutching a flask. You don't sleep, do you? She asked, sliding onto a crate beside him. Not much point, he replied, voice heavy. Dreams just remind me what I lost. He tapped his arm again. A hollow sound. They took more than this. Took my crew, my ship, left me feeling like a tool, not a man. Kalia studied him, seeing the fracture beneath his bravado. You're not a tool, Torin. You're a weapon, and we need you sharp. He snorted, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. Sharp enough to cut them. Huh? Sharp enough to make them regret ever crossing us. Their fragile alliance solidified over the next 2 days. Torin's device, a crude prototype he dubbed the Ghost Pulse, neared completion. Kalia drilled the fleet, pushing them through mock battles in the asteroid field. They were green, sloppy, but they learned fast. Survivors always did. Then the sky turned red. It started as a blip on the Outpost sensors, a Nexus patrol ship. Sleek and deadly, dropping out of FTL near Jupiter's orbit. Within hours, it struck. The target wasn't Outpost 17, but Horizon Station, a civilian hub housing 10,000 souls, miners, families, traders. Kalia watched the feed from a smuggler's relay, her fists clenched as the Nexus vessel unleashed a barrage of plasma. The station's defenses crumpled, its hull splitting like paper. Escape pods launched, only to be picked off one by one. 10,000 voices silenced in minutes. The outpost fell quiet, the weight of the massacre pressing down on every soul. Kalia stood in the command bay, the hollow feed flickering with static and screams. Torin joined her, his face pale but resolute. They're testing us, he said, voice low, seeing if we'll break. They don't know us, Kalia replied, her hazel eyes blazing. She turned to the crew. 50 faces now, hardened by loss. Horizon's gone. The council won't do a damn thing. But we will. Torin, how close is that ghost pulse? 2 days, he said, straightening. Maybe 1 if I don't sleep. Make it 1. She faced the others, her voice a blade cutting through despair. We're not waiting for them to hit us again. We take the fight to the forbidden zone. We show them humanity doesn't bend. A murmur rippled through the crowd, not cheers, but something fiercer. Resolve. Torin nodded, already moving back to his bench. Kalia lingered, staring at the hollow feed's final frame, Horizon's wreckage drifting like ash in the void. She'd lost her crew, now she'd lost more, but she wouldn't lose this fight. In the shadows of Outpost 17, the Ash fleet sharpened its claws. The Nexus had drawn first blood. Soon, they'd learn what it cost to awaken a sleeping giant. Chapter 3. Allies in the Dark. The Forbidden Zone stretched before them. A graveyard of stars swallowed by the nebula's violet haze. Kalia Serys stood on the bridge of the Ash Talon. Her flagship, a battered freighter refitted with salvaged cannons and a prayer. The Ash fleet flanked her, 30 ships strong, their hulls glinting faintly as they slipped through the relic gate. The transition was smoother this time. The gate's energy bending space with a quiet hum. But Kalia's grip on the helm tightened, her mind replaying the Dawnseeker's fiery end. Not again, she vowed silently, not on her watch. Scanners up, she ordered, her voice cutting through the bridge's tension. Torin Vex stood at the sensor console, his cybernetic arm plugged into the system, eyes flickering with data. The crew, still raw, still learning, moved with a nervous energy that belied their resolve. No Nexus signatures yet, Torin reported, his tone clipped. But there's something, faint, erratic, could be interference from the nebula. Or a trap, Kalia muttered. Keep us dark, no transmissions, no lights. We're ghosts until I say otherwise. The fleet drifted deeper, weaving through asteroid clusters and the husks of ancient wrecks, ships older than humanity. Their origins lost to the void. Kalia's plan was simple. Find allies. Anyone who'd suffered under Nexus's boot. The Earth Council might cower. But she'd heard whispers, species out here. Scattered and defiant, who hated the Empire as much as she did. If she could rally them, the Ash fleet might stand a chance. Hours passed in silence, the nebula's glow painting the bridge in eerie hues. Then Torin stiffened. Contact. Bearing 039. It's small, fast, not Nexus. Visual. Kalia snapped. The viewscreen flickered, revealing a sleek vessel, its hull shimmering with a pearlescent sheen. It darted between asteroids with a grace no human ship could match. Then slowed, broadcasting a signal on an open frequency. This is Elyra Taan of the Zoryn. A voice chimed, soft but firm, laced with an alien cadence. Identify yourselves, or I assume you're Nexus dogs and open fire. Kalia raised an eyebrow, gesturing to the comms officer. This is Captain Kalia Serys. Ash Fleet. We're human, not Nexus. Looking for friends, not a fight. A pause stretched, heavy with suspicion. Then the viewscreen shifted, and Elyra Taan appeared. She was humanoid, her skin a pale silver that caught the light. Her eyes large and luminous, shifting from gold to green. A faint hum pulsed around her, telepathic resonance. Kalia guessed, a trait of her species. She wore a tunic of woven fibers, simple yet regal, and her expression was guarded. Humans, Elyra said, tilting her head, you're bold to cross the Forbidden Zone after what they did to your kind. Why are you here? Kalia leaned forward, her hazel eyes locked on Elyra's. Because Nexus thinks they can slaughter us and walk away. We're here to prove them wrong. And we need help. Elyra's lips twitched, a smile. Maybe, or a grimace. Help comes at a cost. Captain, the Zoryn know Nexus's cruelty. They burned our cities when we refused their tribute. I'm in exile now, one of few who escaped. But I don't trust easily. Neither do I. Kalia shot back, but we've got a common enemy. That's a start. Another pause. Then Elyra nodded. Dock with my ship. We talk face to face. No weapons. Kalia hesitated, glancing at Torin. He shrugged, unplugging his arm. She's not shooting. That's more than Nexus gave us. Fair point, Kalia said. Take us in. The Ash Talon maneuvered alongside Elyra's vessel, a docking tube extending with a hiss. Kalia led a small team, Torin and 2 pilots, across the umbilical. Stepping into a chamber of smooth, curved walls that pulsed faintly with light, Elyra waited alone, her presence commanding despite her slight frame. Up close, Kalia saw scars tracing her neck, barely visible against her silver skin, marks of a survivor. You're not like the others, Elyra said, studying Kalia. Most humans have met beg or bargain. You're angry. 200 of my crew burned. Kalia replied, her voice low. 10,000 more died at Horizon Station. Anger's all I've got left. Elyra's eyes flickered, a ripple of emotion Kalia couldn't read. Then listen. Nexus isn't just an empire, it's a machine. Built to control everything. The relic gate you opened? It's a threat to them. It leads to the eternal source. Torin stepped forward, his metal arm whirring. Eternal source? What is it? Elyra hesitated, then waved a hand. A holographic projection flared to life, a swirling vortex of light. Orbited by fragments of ruined worlds. A remnant of the Precursors. The ones who built the gates. Its energy, pure and infinite, enough to power a galaxy, or destroy it. Nexus wants it for themselves. Kalia's mind raced. That's why they hit us so hard. They're scared we'll get it first. Exactly, Elyra said. They've locked down this sector. But their network has blind spots, gaps in their sensors. I can give you the map. Show you where to strike. But I need something in return. Name it, Kalia said, her tone firm. Elyra's gaze hardened. When you fight Nexus, you don't stop until they're broken. My people deserve justice, too. Kalia nodded slowly. Deal. But you're with us. Elyra, I don't trust maps from someone who won't bleed beside me. The Zoryn woman smiled faintly. A real one this time. Fair. I'll join you. But know this, Captain. The source isn't just power. It's a Pandora's box. Open it, and you might not like what comes out. Torin snorted. We've already got a galaxy trying to kill us. How much worse can it get? Famous last words, Elyra murmured, but she handed Kalia a data crystal. Its surface etched with alien runes. The blind spots. Use them wisely. Back on the Ash Talon. Kalia plugged the crystal into the navigation console. A star map bloomed, dotted with red zones, Nexus patrols, and green patches where their sensors faltered. Torin whistled low. She's not lying. We could hit their outposts. Vanish before they blink. Good, Kalia said, her mind already spinning plans. We start small, test Torin's ghost pulse. Gather intel, then we go for the gate. Elyra joined them on the bridge, her presence a quiet weight. Kalia studied her, searching for cracks in her story. The Zoryn was an ally, but not a friend, not yet. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after the Dawnseeker. Still, Elyra's scars mirrored her own, and that counted for something. Captain, a crew member shouted, breaking her thoughts. Sensors, 3 Nexus ships, dropping out of FTL. They're on us. Kalia spun to the viewscreen. 3 angular silhouettes emerged from the nebula, their weapons charging with a sickly green glow. Her heart thudded, but her voice stayed steel. All ships, scatter, use the blind spots. Torin, get that pulse ready. The bridge erupted into motion, the Ash fleet breaking formation like shards of glass. Elyra gripped a railing, her eyes wide but steady. They're faster than I thought, she said. We'll need more than luck. Then it's a damn good thing we've got more than that, Kalia replied, banking the Ash Talon hard into an asteroid field. The Nexus ships pursued, their beams lancing through the dark. The fight was on, and this time, Kalia wouldn't run. In the nebula's depths, humanity's defiance flickered brighter, a flame Nexus couldn't snuff out. Not yet. Chapter 4. The Ghost Pulse. The asteroid field spun around the Ash Talon like a storm of jagged teeth. Each rock a shield against the Nexus ships closing in. Kalia Serys gripped the helm, her knuckles white as she wove the ship through the chaos. Green beams from the enemy lanced past, grazing the hull with a screech that echoed through the bridge. The Ash fleet scattered into the blind spots Elyra's map had promised. But the Nexus vessels were relentless, their sensors adapting faster than expected. Torin, Kalia barked, her voice sharp over the clamor of alarms. Tell me that pulse is ready. Torin Vex hunched over a console, his cybernetic arm buried in a tangle of wires and Nexus tech. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his human hand trembling as he soldered the final connection. Almost there. 30 seconds, he shouted back. His focus absolute. Make it 15. Kalia snapped, banking hard to avoid a collision. The viewscreen flared as a Nexus beam struck an asteroid ahead, shattering it into a hail of debris. Shrapnel pinged off the Ash Talon's shields, and a crew member cursed as sparks flew from a damaged panel. Elyra Taan braced herself against a railing, her silver skin catching the red glow of the emergency lights. Their targeting's too precise, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. They've upgraded since my last intel. Then we improvise, Kalia replied, her hazel eyes narrowing. All ships. Titan formation. Draw them into the field. The comms crackled as the Ash fleet obeyed, their patchwork ships clustering closer. It was a gamble. Bunching up made them a bigger target. But it also forced the Nexus vessels to follow into the maze of rocks. Kalia's heart pounded, her mind racing through every maneuver she'd ever learned. She wasn't losing anyone else. Not today. Done. Torin yelled, slamming a panel shut. He hefted a crude device, boxy, bristling with antennae, its core pulsing with a faint blue light. The ghost pulse. Plugging it in now, his metal arm jacked into the ship's broadcast system. A jolt running through him as the link synced. The pulse hummed, its energy rippling through the Ash Talon's hull. Torin's eyes flickered with code. His voice tight. Activating. Brace yourselves. A wave of static burst from the ship. Invisible but palpable, washing over the asteroid field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Nexus ships faltered. Their beams veered wildly, one striking an asteroid, another grazing its own ally. Confusion bled through their formation as their AI struggled to process the chaotic signal Torin had unleashed. It's working, Elyra breathed, a rare note of awe in her voice. Their systems think we're everywhere and nowhere. Kalia seized the chance. All ships. Break and attack. Hit them while they're blind. The Ash fleet erupted from the shadows. Cannons blazing. A mining rig turned gunship slammed plasma into a Nexus flank, while a stolen fighter darted in, unloading torpedoes. The lead Nexus vessel, a sleek predator of silver and death, shuddered as its shields flickered. Then fired on its own wingmate. The second ship exploded in a silent bloom of fire, debris scattering like ash. Gotcha, Torin muttered, a grim smile tugging at his lips. He unplugged his arm, slumping against the console, exhaustion carving lines into his face. Kalia spared him a glance, her own adrenaline still surging. Nice work, Vex. Can we do that again? Need better calibration, he panted. This was sloppy, range was short. Effects fading already. Give me more Nexus tech, and I'll make it sing. Then let's get you some, she said, steering the Ash Talon toward the crippled lead ship. Boarding team, prep for salvage. We're not leaving empty-handed. The fight ended as swiftly as it began. The surviving Nexus vessel retreated, limping back into the nebula, while the Ash fleet claimed their prize. Kalia led the boarding party herself, her pistol drawn as she stepped onto the enemy deck. The air was thick with ozone, the corridors eerily silent save for the hiss of breached systems. Nexus crew, tall, insectoid figures with compound eyes, lay dead or dying, their rigid logic no match for human unpredictability. Torin followed, his cybernetic arm scanning for tech. He pried a crystalline core from a shattered console, holding it up like a trophy. This'll do, he said, his voice lighter than she'd heard it. Targeting matrix. Better than the scraps I had. Kalia nodded, but her gaze lingered on a dead Nexus soldier, its mandibles frozen mid-snarl. They didn't even try to talk, she said, half to herself. Just kill or be killed. They're machines, Torin replied, his tone hardening. Even the organic ones. No soul, no mercy. She didn't argue, but the weight of command pressed heavier. Every victory cost something, lives, ships, pieces of herself she couldn't name. She pushed the thought down, focusing on the hull. The team stripped the wreck of anything useful, weapons, power cells, more fragments for Torin's work, then rigged it to blow. No evidence, no trail. Back on the Ash Talon, the fleet regrouped in a blind spot, the nebula cloaking them once more. Kalia stood with Torin in his makeshift lab, watching as he dissected the new core. Sparks danced from his tools, illuminating the scars on his human hand, marks of a life Nexus had tried to erase. You're good at this, she said, breaking the silence. Better than good. Torin shrugged, not looking up. Had to be. After they cut me up. It was adapt or die. Figured out their systems to escape, turned their own drones against them. Guess I've got a knack for breaking things. Building, too, Kalia countered, nodding at the ghost pulse. That saved us today. He paused, his metal fingers flexing. Maybe. Still feels like I'm just patching holes. Not really fighting. She stepped closer, her voice low but firm. You're fighting, Torin. Every second you keep us alive, you're sticking it to them. Don't sell yourself short. He met her eyes, something softening in his guarded stare. You sound like you mean it. I do, she said simply. We're a team now. I need you. All of you, if we're going to win this. Torin nodded slowly, a flicker of pride breaking through his doubt. Then I'll make this pulse a damn nightmare for them. Next time, they won't even see us coming. Good, Kalia said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Because I'm tired of running. Their moment was cut short by Elyra's voice over the comms. Captain, sensors are picking up chatter, Nexus reinforcements. Headed this way. They're locking down the zone. Kalia's smile vanished, replaced by the steel of command. How long? Hours. Maybe less. Elyra replied. We need to move. Torin, get that core integrated, Kalia ordered, already striding toward the bridge. We've got a fight to plan. As she left, Torin watched her go, his human hand tightening around the Nexus crystal. For the first time since his escape, he felt something beyond revenge, a purpose. Tethered to the woman who refused to let humanity fade. The ghost pulse hummed beside him, a promise of chaos to come. In the dark of the Forbidden Zone, the Ash fleet sharpened its edge, ready to strike again. Chapter 5. Raid on the Outpost. The relic gate loomed ahead, its obsidian ring cutting a stark silhouette against the nebula's violet glow. Kalia Serys stood on the Ash Talon's bridge, her eyes fixed on the prize, a Nexus outpost orbiting the gate's perimeter. The station was small but lethal, a spiderweb of turrets and sensors guarding access to the eternal source. If they could take it, they'd hold the key to Nexus's secrets. If they failed, the Ash fleet would be ash indeed. Final checks, Kalia ordered, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. The bridge buzzed with activity. The crew, now 40 ships strong, moving with a precision born of desperation. Torin Vex stood at his station, the upgraded ghost pulse humming beside him, its blue light casting shadows across his scarred face. Elyra Taan lingered near the comms, her silver skin taut with tension. Pulse is primed, Torin said, his cybernetic arm jacked into the device. Range is double last time, should scramble their defenses for 10 minutes. Maybe 12, enough to get us in. Kalia replied. Elyra, what's the layout? The Zoryn woman projected a hollow map from her data crystal. 3 levels, she said, pointing. Outer rings automated turrets. Middle's the power core, take that down. And their shields drop. Core's the command hub, data's there. And the gate controls. Kalia nodded, her mind racing through the plan. We hit fast, pulse disables the turrets. Boarding teams breach the core. Torin, you're with me. Elyra, you'll jam their comms. No survivors. No signals. Elyra's luminous eyes flickered. No mercy. Then? Not for them, Kalia said, her tone cold. They didn't give it to Horizon. The fleet slipped into position, using the nebula's blind spots to mask their approach. Kalia's heart thudded, her palms slick on the helm. She'd lost too much to hesitate now, her crew. Her innocence. The naive hope that exploration could be peaceful. This was war, and she'd fight it her way. Activate the pulse, she commanded. Torin flipped the switch, and a wave of distortion rippled outward. The outpost's turrets swiveled erratically, firing into empty space as the ghost pulse flooded their systems with phantom targets. Kalia grinned despite herself. All ships, advance. Boarding teams, go. The Ash Talon led the charge, flanked by fighters and refitted freighters. Nexus drones launched from the outpost, but their targeting faltered, crashing into each other or drifting aimlessly. Kalia docked the Ash Talon against the outer ring, the hull shuddering as clamps locked. She grabbed her pistol and a breaching charge, Torin and a dozen others falling in behind her. The airlock blew open with a roar, and they stormed inside. The corridors were stark, smooth metal walls lit by green strips. The air heavy with the buzz of Nexus tech. Kalia moved like a predator, her team fanning out to secure the outer ring. A lone Nexus guard, an insectoid figure with clacking mandibles, lunged from a side passage. She fired twice, dropping it before it could sound an alarm. Clear, she called, waving the team forward. Torin hacked a terminal, his metal arm sparking as he bypassed security. Shields are down, he said, middle levels open. They descended, the station's hum growing louder. The power core loomed ahead, a towering cylinder pulsing with energy. Guarded by a squad of Nexus soldiers, Kalia signaled, and her team opened fire. Plasma bolts lit the chamber, the enemy returning volleys that scorched the walls. A pilot, Rhea, a young woman with a quick laugh, took a hit to the chest. Collapsing with a gasp, Kalia froze for a split second, Ray's face blurring into Merrick's. Into her parents. No, she roared. Charging forward, she emptied her clip into the nearest guard, then slammed a breaching charge onto the core. Torin, cover me. He stepped up, his arm whirring as he unleashed a barrage from a salvaged Nexus rifle. The charge detonated, and the core flared, then dimmed, its energy fading. The station's lights flickered, shields collapsing across the hollow map Elyra monitored from the bridge. Cores down, Kalia panted, kneeling beside Rhea. The woman's eyes were glassy, her breath gone. Kalia's hands shook as she closed them, a silent promise burning in her chest. Not again. Command hub's next, Torin said, his voice tight. We're on borrowed time. They pushed deeper, the station trembling as the ash fleet pounded its exterior. The command hub was a dome of screens and consoles. Its Nexus overseer, a towering figure with 4 arms, waiting with a pulse cannon. Kalia dove behind cover as it fired, the blast shattering a wall. Elyra, now, she shouted into her comms. On the Ash Talon, Elyra closed her eyes, her telepathic resonance surging. She projected a flood of noise into the overseer's mind, screams. Static, chaos. It staggered, its cannon dipping. Kalia seized the moment, rolling out and firing at its joints. Torin followed, targeting its weapon. The overseer collapsed, circuits sparking from its ruined frame. Secure the hub, Kalia ordered. Torin jacked into the central console. Downloading data, gate controls, patrol routes, encrypted files. Got it, he said, unplugging. We can activate the gate. Then do it, Kalia replied, her voice steel. She wouldn't lose Rhea for nothing. Torin triggered the sequence, and the relic gate flared to life beyond the outpost's viewport. A vortex of blue light spiraled open, its edges crackling with power. For a moment, they stared, awed by the glimpse of something infinite. That awe shattered as alarms blared. Nexus reinforcements. Elyra's voice crackled over the comms. 3 ships. Dropping in now. Kalia spun to the viewport. 3 Nexus cruisers emerged from the nebula, their weapons charging. All teams, back to the ships, she shouted, grabbing Torin's arm. Move. They ran, the station shaking as Nexus beams struck. The boarding team sprinted through corridors, dragging their haul, data, weapons. Ray's body. Torin stumbled, his cybernetic arm sparking from a stray hit. Kalia hauled him up, her strength fueled by fury. Not losing you, too, she growled. They reached the Ash Talon as the outpost began to buckle, its structure failing under the barrage. Kalia slammed into the helm, barking orders. Pulse again. Buy us time. Torin activated it, the wave scattering the Nexus targeting locks. The fleet broke away, diving into the blind spots. But not before a freighter, the Iron Sparrow, took a direct hit. Erupting in a fireball, Kalia's breath caught, her vision blurring with rage and grief. Status, she demanded. 29 ships left, Elyra reported, her voice soft. We've got the data, Captain. The gate's ours. Kalia nodded, forcing her focus back. Set course for the rally point. We're not done yet. As the Ash Talon slipped into the nebula, Torin approached, his face pale. Rhea, she was good, he said quietly. Didn't deserve that. No one does, Kalia replied, her voice breaking. But they'll pay for it. Every damn one of them. Elyra joined them, her gaze distant. The gate's active, but Nexus won't stop. They'll hunt us now, harder than before. Let them, Kalia said, her hazel eyes burning. We've got their secrets. We've got the source. And we've got each other. The fleet vanished into the dark, the relic gate's light fading behind them. They'd won a battle, but the war was just beginning. And Kalia Serys, bloodied but unbowed, would see it through, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. Secrets under the light. The relic gate's vortex pulsed like a heartbeat, its blue light spilling across the Ash Talon's bridge. Kalia Serys stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the swirling abyss they'd fought so hard to claim. The Nexus outpost lay in ruins behind them, its wreckage drifting into the nebula's embrace. 29 ships remained of the Ash Fleet, their hulls scarred but unbroken. They'd paid in blood, raise the Iron Sparrow's crew, but the gate was theirs. And with it, a chance at something greater. Take us through, Kalia ordered, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. Small team only, Ash Talon and 2 escorts. The rest hold position. Torin Vex glanced up from his console, his cybernetic arm still sparking faintly from the outpost fight. You sure about this, Captain? We don't know what's on the other side. Exactly why we're going, Kalia replied, meeting his eyes. Nexus wants the eternal source bad enough to kill for it. I want to know why. Elyra Taan stepped forward, her silver skin catching the gate's glow. The Precursors left warnings, she said, her tone cautious. Their records hint at power and ruin. We tread carefully, or we don't tread at all. Kalia nodded, but her resolve didn't waver. Careful doesn't mean slow. Let's move. The Ash Talon led the way, flanked by the Dust Wraith and Ember Claw. The gate's energy enveloped them, a sensation like falling through water, weightless, endless. Then the universe snapped back, and they emerged into a realm of shattered beauty. A vast ring of debris orbited a radiant core, a sphere of light that pulsed with colors no human eye could name. Ruined structures, towers, bridges, ships, floated in the void, relics of a civilization long dead. Holy hell, Torin muttered, his scanners whirring. This place, it's a graveyard. Energy readings are off the charts. Kalia's breath caught. The eternal source, she said, pointing to the core. That's what Nexus is after. Elyra projected a hollow map, her fingers tracing alien runes etched into the data crystal. The Precursors called it Aetherus, she explained. Not just energy, it's a key. It bends space, time, matter. They used it to build their empire, and it destroyed them. Destroyed how? Kalia pressed, her mind racing. Elyra hesitated, then gestured to the debris. The records are fragmented. Some say they overreached, tried to reshape reality itself. Others say it turned on them. Unstable. Either way, this is what's left. Torin unplugged his arm, frowning. So it's a weapon? More than that, Elyra said. It's possibility. Nexus wants to control it, reshape the galaxy in their image. Kalia stared at the Aetherus, its light reflecting in her hazel eyes. She'd come for vengeance, for justice, but this was bigger. If they could harness it, humanity wouldn't just survive, they'd thrive. Yet Ray's lifeless face flashed in her mind, a reminder of the cost. We need more than guesses, she said. Torin, scan it. Elyra, find me something concrete. The team split off. Torin deployed drones to probe the Aetherus, their feeds streaming data back to the Ash Talon. Elyra joined Kalia in a smaller chamber off the bridge, where a Precursor console flickered to life under her touch. Its surface glowed with symbols, spirals, grids, waves, and Elyra's telepathic resonance hummed as she deciphered them. These are logs, she murmured, her eyes distant. The Precursors built the gates to connect their worlds. Aetherus powered them, but it demanded balance, input matching output. They broke that balance, and it unraveled everything. Kalia leaned closer, her voice low. Can we use it without breaking ourselves? Elyra didn't answer immediately, her fingers pausing over a rune. Maybe, she said at last, but there's something else. Nexus knows more than I thought. They've been here before. What? Kalia's tone sharpened. How do you know that? Elyra's gaze dropped, a shadow crossing her face. Because I helped them, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Years ago, I was their liaison, fed them intel on the gates. On my people. I thought it'd save us. It didn't. Kalia's hand twitched toward her pistol, instinct warring with reason. You were a spy? An unwilling one, Elyra said, meeting her eyes. They held my family hostage, my sister, my kin. I gave them scraps, delayed them. When I refused more, they burned our cities anyway. I escaped, but I've carried that guilt ever since. The confession hung heavy, a crack in the trust Kalia had started to build. Why tell me now? She demanded. Because you deserve the truth, Elyra replied, and because Nexus is coming. They'll kill us all to keep this. Before Kalia could respond, Torin's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, trouble, Nexus ships, 5 of them. Dropping out of FTL on our tail. Kalia spun to the viewscreen. 5 angular silhouettes pierced the nebula. Their weapons charging. The Ash Talon rocked as a beam grazed its shields. Alarms blaring. All hands. Battle stations, she shouted. Torin, get that pulse up. Torin sprinted to the bridge, plugging the ghost pulse into the system. The wave hit, scattering the Nexus targeting. But these ships adapted faster, shields recalibrating. Drones swarming. They've upgraded. Torin growled. Pulse won't hold them long. Elyra, options. Kalia snapped, banking the Ash Talon behind a Precursor ruin. Elyra's hands flew over the console. The Aetherus, it's got a defensive protocol. I can trigger it, but it'll drain the gate's power. One shot, maybe. Do it, Kalia said, her voice steel. She wouldn't lose this, not after Rhea. Not after everything. Elyra activated the sequence, and the Aetherus flared, a pulse of light surging outward. The Nexus ships froze, their systems frying as the wave hit. 2 exploded outright, the others drifting helplessly. The Ash Talon and its escorts fired, picking off the survivors in a blaze of plasma. Threat neutralized, Torin reported, unplugging the pulse. But the gate's dimming, Elyra's right. That took a chunk out of it. Kalia turned to Elyra, her expression hard. You just saved us, but we're not done talking about Nexus. Elyra nodded, her eyes shadowed. I know, I'll earn your trust, Captain, or die trying. The team retreated through the gate, the Aetherus's light fading behind them. They'd glimpsed its power, its danger, and Nexus's desperation. Kalia stood alone on the bridge after, staring at the data Torin had pulled. The eternal source could change everything. But at what cost? Ray's death weighed on her. A reminder that victory wasn't free. And Elyra's betrayal, however coerced, gnawed at her. We're not just fighting for revenge anymore, she murmured to the empty room. We're fighting for a future. The Ash Talon rejoined the fleet. Battered but alive, the Nexus would come again. Harder now, but Kalia Serys was ready. The light of the Aetherus had shown her a path, not just to survive, but to rise. Chapter 7. Confronting the Nexus. The nebula trembled as the Nexus H fleet emerged. A wall of silver death blotting out the stars. 5 cruisers, twice as many frigates, and a swarm of drones dropped from FTL, their weapons glowing green against the violet haze. Kalia Serys stood on the Ash Talon's bridge, her heart a drumbeat of fury and focus. The relic gate pulsed faintly behind them, its power drained from Elyra's last-ditch defense. The Ash fleet, 29 ships, battered but defiant, faced an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1. This wasn't a skirmish, this was a reckoning. Status, Kalia barked, her hands steady on the helm. Torin Vex hunched over his console, the ghost pulse flickering with upgrades he'd rushed after the Outpost raid. Pulse is maxed, 15-minute window. Tops, he said, his cybernetic arm sparking as he synced it. They've adapted, though, won't be as clean as before. Elyra Taan scanned the holomap, her silver fingers trembling slightly. They're locking the zone, no retreat vectors. It's us or them. Then it's them, Kalia said, her voice steel. All ships, battle formation. Torin, hit them with the pulse. We're not waiting to die. The fleet tightened, a jagged spearhead of humanity's wrath. Torin activated the ghost pulse, and a wave of distortion surged outward, rippling through the Nexus ranks. Drones veered into each other, exploding in silent bursts, while the frigate's beams went wild, carving gashes in their own hulls. But the cruisers held firm, their shields flickering as they recalibrated. They're learning too fast, Torin growled, unplugging his arm. We've got minutes before they're back online. Minutes are enough, Kalia replied, banking the Ash Talon toward the lead cruiser. All ships, concentrate fire, break their line. The Ash fleet struck like a storm. The Dust Wraith unleashed a barrage of torpedoes, tearing into a frigate's flank, while the Ember Claw danced through drone swarms, its cannons blazing. Kalia pushed the Ash Talon into the fray, plasma bolts lighting the viewscreen as they hammered the cruiser's shields. The Nexus fought back, their beams slicing through the Iron Raven, a refitted freighter. It erupted, debris scattering like ash. Another loss. Kalia felt like a punch to the gut. Torin, get me inside that cruiser, she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. I want their head. He nodded, jacking into the ship's systems. Their docking bays shielded, but I can spoof their sensors, make them think we're one of theirs. Risky as hell. Do it, she said, her hazel eyes blazing. Elyra, cover the fleet, keep them distracted. Elyra's telepathic hum filled the bridge as she projected noise into the Nexus comms. False orders. Static. Panic. The enemy faltered, their coordination fraying. Torin's hack worked, the cruiser's bay opened, mistaking the Ash Talon for a friendly. Kalia docked hard, the clamps locking with a shudder. Boarding team, with me, she shouted, grabbing her pistol. Torin followed, his Nexus rifle humming, joined by 10 others, hardened survivors with nothing left to lose. The cruiser's interior was a labyrinth of cold metal and green light, its air thick with the drone of machinery. Nexus soldiers, tall, insectoid, relentless, met them at the bay, their pulse rifles spitting energy. Kalia dove behind a crate, returning fire, her shots precise. Torin unleashed a volley, his cybernetic arm steady despite the chaos. 2 of their team fell. Screams cut short, but they pushed forward, carving a path to the command deck. The door slid open, revealing the heart of the beast, an AI core encased in crystal, its surface pulsing with red light. A voice boomed, mechanical and vast. I am Vanguard, Warden of Nexus Order. You are chaos incarnate. You will be purged. Torin froze, his human hand trembling. It's like the ones that cut me up, he whispered, memories of pain flashing in his eyes. Needles, wires, a voice like that one stripping his humanity. Kalia grabbed his shoulder, her grip fierce. You're not their toy anymore. You're ours. End it. Vanguard's drones surged from the walls, their blades whirring. Kalia rolled, firing at their joints, while Torin charged the core. A drone slashed his side, blood soaking his shirt, but he didn't stop. He jacked his arm into the crystal, his mind clashing with Vanguard's, human chaos against rigid logic. Code streamed through him, his teeth gritted as he overrode its defenses. You think you're more? Vanguard taunted. You're a hybrid, less than whole. I'm enough, Torin snarled, his voice breaking through the pain. He unleashed a feedback loop, his own fractured thoughts, grief, rage, hope, flooding the AI. The core flared, then cracked, Vanguard's voice dissolving into static. The drones collapsed, and Torin slumped, blood pooling beneath him. Kalia caught him, hauling him up. Stay with me, damn it, she said, her voice raw. We're not done. Outside, the battle raged. Elyra's interference bought time, but the Nexus regrouped, their cruisers pounding the Ash fleet. The Ash Talon's crew fired from the bay, holding the line as Kalia dragged Torin back. She reached the comms, her breath ragged. Elyra, status. 12 ships down. Elyra replied, her tone grim. We're losing ground. Kalia's mind raced. They'd taken the cruiser, killed its brain, but the fleet was dying. Pulse one more time, she ordered Torin, propping him against a console. He nodded weakly, plugging in. The ghost pulse fired, weaker now, but enough to scatter the Nexus line. The Ash Talon broke free, the fleet limping behind. Kalia watched the viewscreen as the cruiser drifted, its lights fading, a hollow victory. Back at the rally point, the Nebula cloaked their retreat. 17 ships remained, a third of what they'd started with. Kalia stood over Torin as a medic patched him up, her hands clenched. You did it, she said quietly. Vanguard's gone. Torin winced, his human hand clutching his side. Felt good, shutting that bastard up. But we're bleeding out there. I know, Kalia said, her voice heavy. Rhea, the Iron Sparrow, now half her fleet, each loss carved deeper. She turned to Elyra, who stood apart, her eyes shadowed. You said Nexus would hunt us harder. You were right. Elyra nodded, her silver skin dull in the dim light. They'll send more. The source is their obsession, and ours now. Kalia looked at the data from the gate, still clutched in her pack. The Aetherus could turn the tide. But at what cost? She'd pushed them here, driven by rage, by the need to strike back. Now she wondered if she'd pushed too far. Captain, Torin said, his voice soft but firm. You got us this far. Don't doubt it now. She met his gaze, seeing the flicker of trust beneath his pain. I don't doubt us, she said. I doubt me. Elyra stepped closer, her tone gentle. You're not Nexus, Kalia. They destroy without thought. You fight for something. Don't lose that. Kalia took a deep breath, the weight of command settling like armor. We've got the data, the gate, a shot at the source. Nexus wants a war? They'll get one. The Ash Talon's engines hummed, the fleet licking its wounds. They'd faced the Nexus and lived, barely. But Kalia knew this was just the storm's edge. The real fight loomed, and she'd lead them into it, bloodied but unbowed. Chapter 8. Negotiations from Strength. The rally point was a shadowed pocket of the nebula, a sanctuary of silence after the storm. The Ash fleet, 17 ships left, huddled among the asteroids, their hulls pocked with scars from the Nexus onslaught. Kalia Serys stood on the Ash Talon's bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, staring at the relic gate's faint glow on the viewscreen. They'd bloodied Nexus, taken down Vanguard, but the cost gnawed at her, half her fleet gone, faces she'd known reduced to memory. Yet they'd won something, too. Leverage, Captain. Elyra Taan's voice broke the quiet, her silver form gliding onto the bridge. Nexus is hailing us, open channel. No weapons detected. They want to talk. Kalia's hazel eyes narrowed. Talk? After they tried to wipe us out? Torin Vex, patched up but pale, leaned against his console, the ghost pulse dim beside him. Could be a trap, he said, his voice rough. They don't exactly play nice. Or they're scared. Elyra countered, her luminous eyes steady. You hit them harder than anyone has in centuries. They're bleeding, too. Kalia weighed the words, her mind a battlefield of doubt and resolve. Patch them through, she said at last. Let's hear what they've got. The viewscreen flickered, revealing a Nexus emissary, not an insectoid soldier, but a humanoid figure cloaked in silver. Its face a smooth mask of metal. Its voice was cold, modulated. I am ENVOY7, voice of the Nexus Collective. Your resistance has been noted. We offer terms. Terms? Kalia's laugh was sharp. You murdered thousands of us, Horizon. My crew. You don't get to set terms. Envoy 7's mask tilted, unreadable. The Collective seeks order, not annihilation. Your species disrupted that order. We propose a ceasefire, access to the Forbidden Zone. Limited, under our oversight. In return, we cease hostilities. Torin snorted, his cybernetic arm flexing. Oversight? So you can leash us like dogs? We offer stability. Envoy 7 replied. Your chaos threatens the galaxy. Kalia stepped closer to the screen, her voice low and lethal. You don't get it, do you? We're not your pets. We've got the gate, the source, your data. You're not negotiating from strength, we are. Here's my offer. You pull back, abandon the zone, and answer for your massacres. Or we keep coming. A pause stretched, the emissary's silence heavy. Your terms are ambitious. It said finally. The Collective will deliberate. Stand by. The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in a hush. Kalia turned to Elyra and Torin, her expression hard. They're stalling. We need a plan if this goes south. Elyra nodded, projecting the gate data. The Aetherus is still viable, weakened. But we can recharge it. If they attack, we use it again, defensive pulse. Like last time. And bleed it dry? Torin asked, frowning. We'd lose our edge. Better than losing everything, Elyra said, her tone firm. Nexus is fractured. Your strike on Vanguard shook them. My contacts say their council's arguing. Some want peace. Others want war. Kalia paced, her boots echoing. Peace sounds good, but not if it's a cage. We didn't fight this hard to kneel. Torin watched her, his human hand tracing the bandage on his side. You're thinking bigger, he said quietly. Not just survival, something else. She stopped, meeting his gaze. Yeah, the source isn't just a weapon, it's a future. If we control it, we're not pawns anymore. We're players. Elyra's eyes flickered, a mix of awe and unease. That's what Nexus fears, humans unbound. But can you wield it without becoming them? The question hung, unanswered, as the comms beeped again. Envoy 7 reappeared. The Collective agrees, partially. The zone is yours, unrestricted. Hostilities end. But justice, we do not submit to your courts. Kalia's jaw tightened. You don't get to walk away clean. Horizon's dead deserve more. We offer reparations. Envoy 7 said. Resources. Tech. Your worlds rebuild. The collective remains intact. Torin leaned forward, his voice sharp. And you keep killing when it suits you? No deal. Kalia held up a hand, silencing him. Reparations. Fine. But we want a new alliance, open, equal. No more empires lording over us. And the gate's ours, full control. Envoy 7's mask shifted, a faint hum underscoring its words. A coalition, unprecedented. The collective will require assurances, your chaos contained. Our chaos, Kalia said, her tone icy. Is what beat you. Take it or leave it. Another pause. Then. Accepted. Terms will be formalized. Stand by for transmission. The screen blanked, and Kalia exhaled, tension draining from her shoulders. Torin grinned. Weak but genuine. You just stared down an empire and won. Barely, she said, her smile faint. They'll test us again. Count on it. Elyra approached, her expression softer. You've changed things. Kalia, the Zoryn, my people, might find a voice in this alliance. I'll stay. Help you build it. Kalia studied her, the sting of Elyra's past betrayal fading against her actions now. Good. We'll need you. Later, in her quarters. Kalia sat alone, the data crystal glowing on her desk. The weight of command pressed down, raised death. The lost ships, the lives she'd wagered. She'd demanded justice. But this peace felt fragile. A stepping stone rather than an end. The source beckoned, a promise of power she wasn't sure she could wield. Elyra's question echoed. Can you use it without becoming them? Torin knocked, stepping in with a limp. Thought you'd be celebrating, he said, easing onto a crate. Celebrating's for when we're safe. She replied, her voice soft. This is just a breather. He nodded, his human hand resting on his knee. You did good out there. Gave us something to fight for, not just against. Kalia met his eyes, seeing the man beneath the scars. Hybrid. Survivor. Friend. You gave me that, Torin. That pulse. Your guts. We'd be dead without you. He shrugged, a flicker of pride breaking through. Team effort. Guess I'm more than a tool. Huh? Damn right, she said, a real smile breaking free. Your family now. The moment lingered, a quiet anchor amid the storm. Elyra joined them shortly after, her presence a bridge between species. The transmission's in, she said. Terms are set, zones ours. Alliance forming. They're pulling back. Kalia stood, her resolve hardening. Then we start building. The source. The fleet. This coalition. We make it ours. Not theirs. Torin straightened, wincing but determined. Got a pulse to tweak. Next time. They won't even get close. Elyra smiled faintly. And I'll reach out, Zoryn. Others. Nexus won't own the stars alone anymore. The Ash Talon hummed, its engines warming for the journey home. Kalia looked out the viewport. The nebulas glow a testament to their defiance. They'd fought from weakness to strength. From ash to flame. Nexus had bent, not broken. Not yet, but the galaxy had shifted. Humanity wasn't just surviving now. It was rising. And Kalia Serys, bloodied but unbowed, would lead them into whatever came next. Chapter 9. A New Flame. A year had passed since the Nexus bent, and the stars bore witness to humanity's resurgence. Near the Relic Gate, a new settlement rose, a sprawling hub of steel and light orbiting a gas giant's rings. Named Aether Haven, it was the Ash Fleet's crown jewel, built from the bones of salvaged ships and the dreams of survivors. Kalia Serys stood on its observation deck, her navy jacket replaced by a simple tunic, the scars of war etched into its fabric and her soul. Beyond the viewport, the eternal source pulsed faintly, its power now humanity's to wield. The station buzzed with life, pilots, engineers, families from Earth and its colonies, all drawn by the promise of a fresh start. 17 ships had grown to 50, bolstered by defectors from Nexus space and allies rallied by Elyra Taan. The coalition, formerly the Stellar Accord, stood as a fragile but defiant pact, binding humans, Zoryn, and a dozen other species against the old empire's shadow. Kalia traced the edge of a hollow disk in her hand, her father's laughter echoing from a memory she'd clung to through the dark. She'd lost so much, her parents, her crew, Rhea, half the fleet, but she'd gained something, too, a purpose beyond rage, a flame kindled from ash. Captain? Torin Vex's voice pulled her back. He limped slightly, his side still tender from Vanguard's blade, but his eyes shone with a quiet strength. His cybernetic arm gleamed, polished for once, a badge of survival. Not captain anymore, Kalia said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Just Kalia now. He grinned, a rare lightness in his scarred face. Takes more than a title to lead. Kalia, they're ready for you down there. She nodded, following him to the central plaza. The ceremony was simple, nothing grand, nothing ostentatious. A crowd gathered around a half-built monument, its base a slab of asteroid rock etched with names: Dawnseeker, Iron Sparrow, Elyra Taan, and thousands more. Elyra Taan waited there, her silver skin catching the artificial sunlight. A Zoryn delegation beside her, proof the accord wasn't just words. Kalia stepped to the podium, her hazel eyes sweeping the faces, human, alien, united. A year ago, she began, her voice steady. We were running, hiding, dying. Nexus thought they could erase us, grind us into dust and move on. They were wrong. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not cheers but a deeper resonance, pride, defiance. She gestured to the monument. This honors our dead, but it's more than that. It's a promise, to rebuild, to remember, to never let anyone take our light again. Torin stood beside Elyra, his human hand resting on the ghost pulse. Now a relic of their war. He'd tweaked it into a beacon, guiding ships through the nebula, a tool of peace, not chaos. Elyra caught his eye, her telepathic hum brushing his mind with warmth. She's changed, she murmured, from fire to foundation. Had to, Torin replied, his voice soft. We all did. Kalia continued, her gaze lifting to the stars. The eternal source isn't just power, it's possibility. We'll use it to grow, to explore, to stand equal among the stars. Nexus bent because we forced them to see us. This accord, she nodded to Elyra's delegation, ensures they never forget. A Zoryn elder stepped forward, placing a crystalline shard into the monument's base, a gesture of trust, of unity. Others followed, human soil, alien artifacts, each a thread in a tapestry of survival. Kalia added her hollow disc last, her father's image flickering one final time before it joined the rest. As the ceremony ended, Elyra approached, her expression gentle. It's beautiful, she said, a new beginning. Hard won, Kalia replied, her voice tinged with weariness. You staying with us? Elyra nodded. The Zoryn need this, need you. I'll bridge our worlds, make sure the accord holds. Good, Kalia said, a weight lifting. We're stronger with you. Torin joined them, his limp less pronounced now. Heard the techs got the source stable. He said, no more frying ships, just clean energy. Guess I'm out of a job. Kalia smirked. Hardly. Someone's got to keep the fleet sharp. You're stuck with me. He chuckled, a sound she hadn't heard in months. Wouldn't have it any other way. The plaza emptied, but the trio lingered, watching construction lights wink across Aether Haven. The station wasn't perfect, supply lines were thin. Nexus still loomed, and not every species trusted the accord. But it was theirs, built from the ashes of despair. A comms officer interrupted, his face tense. Kalia, long-range sensors picked up something, deep space. Beyond the zone, signals faint, but it's not Nexus. She frowned, exchanging looks with Torin and Elyra. Show me, she said, leading them to the command hub. The hollow map flared, a red blip pulsing far beyond known space, erratic, ancient, like the gate's first call. Precursor? Torin asked, plugging his arm into the console. Or something older, Elyra said, her telepathic hum faltering. It feels awake. Kalia's pulse quickened, the explorer in her stirring despite the scars. Options? Monitor it, Torin suggested. Could be nothing, or trouble. Or opportunity. Elyra added, the accord could use a unifying goal. Kalia studied the blip, her mind torn between caution and curiosity. She'd fought for peace, for a future, but the stars never stopped calling. Prep a scout ship, she decided. Small crew, fast, We'll see what's out there. Torin grinned. Already moving. Knew you couldn't sit still. Elyra smiled faintly. I'll coordinate with the Zoryn, whatever it is. We face it together. Later, Kalia stood alone on the observation deck. The gas giant's rings swirling below. The signal's mystery gnawed at her, a threat. A promise. Or both. She'd built Aether Haven to honor the dead. But Torin's words from months ago echoed. You're thinking bigger. He was right. Survival wasn't enough. Humanity deserved more, to reach. To rise. The Ash Talon hummed in its dock. Refitted and ready. She'd lead the scout herself, not as captain, but as Kalia Serys, the woman who'd turned ash into flame. Torin would be there, his pulse a beacon, Elyra, her voice a bridge. Together, they'd face the unknown, not just for Earth, but for every soul who dared to dream among the stars. She spoke to the void, her voice soft but firm. We didn't just survive, we changed the game, and we're not done. The stars stared back, ancient and unyielding, their secrets waiting. The signal pulsed once more. A whisper from the deep. Kalia smiled, a warrior's smile. Tempered by loss, lifted by hope. The Ash Fleet had sparked a fire Nexus couldn't quench. Now, that fire would burn brighter, reaching beyond the forbidden zone. Beyond the known, into a future they'd forge themselves. The Ash Talon's engines flared, a new flame cutting through the dark. Humanity's story wasn't over, it was just beginning.